ranking the members of KISS. 1 being my favorite, 10 being my least favorite. I will also be explaining my reasoning behind my choices. Anyways, let's get started. So, for number 1, I chose Eric Carr. He's a really good drummer. A good example would be his drumming in the opening to Creatures of the Night. And other things, like if you watch any concerts, and they notoriously have like a 10-minute drum solo, I think during God of Thunder. And especially during the Hot in the Shade tour, if you watch any concerts from Hot in the Shade, they do God of Thunder, and you get to see his really long drum solo, and that man just goes crazy on those drums. He also has a really good personality. Good personality meaning he's friendly, he's kind of silly, he's got a good sense of humor. And he also just seems to be a really nice guy to be around from people's accounts of meeting him back in the day. They said he was like an amazing guy to meet. He was signing everything they asked him to, and he was traveling out to fan conventions when the other guys weren't doing that. He was just trying to be there for the fan base, which I respect that. And he's also got some good vocals. Now, for one of their albums, I think it was called Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits, they did revamped versions of older songs. And they had him sing Black Diamond. I've heard those vocals. He's really good. He also sang a song on Hot in the Shade, which was Little Caesar. I haven't heard that one yet, but people have said that his vocals on that song are really good. So, overall, he's my favorite member of the band. For number 2, I chose Ace Frehley. He is probably one of the best guitarists that KISS had. Not just because he is an original member, but because even though he definitely, probably to like professional standards, wasn't the best guitarist in the world, he definitely had a lot of talent. I think he was self-taught, although I'm not entirely sure about that. He inspired a lot of people to pick up the guitar, and a lot of other guitarists in the rock scene especially do respect him. He also had a really good sense of humor. He just laughed at literally anything, and I like people with a goofy sense of humor. Like, there's a lot of interviews where he's just laughing at random things people says. A good example would be the Tom Snyder interview on The Tomorrow Show, which I know he showed up drunk to that interview, but that's probably the best interview that he had. Yeah, so overall, funny, silly guy. And he also, technically speaking, I think he was the worst vocalist out of KISS, technically speaking, from what I've heard, anyways. But songs like 2000 Man, Shock Me, Rocket Ride, among others, his vocals are really good, so just, like, I would go listen to those songs if you want to hear it, but if that's considered to be the worst, then these guys were pretty good in terms of vocals, so. And number 3, Paul Stanley. He's got a lot of energy on stage. If you've ever seen a KISS show, they're running around and causing chaos for like 2 hours straight. And I love it. I love the chaos. he doesn't really have many cool things he does on stage. I forgot to mention that Ace had like a guitar that either he'd put smoke bombs in it, so during his guitar solos it'd start smoking as if it was on fire. Paul didn't really have many of those tricks, although I know that he did start like flying over the audience using a zip line later, which I've seen it a few times, but I don't see it as often as other tricks that I'll get into later. So, for number 4, it's Bruce Kulick. He was the Kiss guitarist from, I think it was Asylum. I think Asylum came out after Analyze. Well, it did, but I don't think it was right after. I don't really know. He was the Kiss guitarist since at least Asylum, all the way up to Carnival of Souls, which is a pretty long time. That's from like early mid-80s to like the mid-90s, so around 10 to 12 years. He was also a very nice, friendly guy. I know he's really good friends with Eric Carr. They did a lot of things outside of Kiss, like musically wise. Like they do, like I think they managed other bands, and they had a few projects that they worked on together outside of Kiss, which, you know, that's pretty cool, because like it shows that even outside of their business relationship, they were still friends outside of that. I also just think he's very cool. Like, his outfits that he wore during his running Kiss were pretty cool. And his on-stage energy was really cool, too. He's also a good guitarist, just in general. Like, he knew how to play guitar. Definitely. I don't know, I can't really speak on who I think the best guitarist Kiss had was, but he was definitely up there, especially because he was with the band for such a long time. For number 5, I chose Peter Criss, the original drummer of Kiss. He definitely was not the best drummer that Kiss had, but he was really good, especially when they first started. He was definitely the person that they needed for drumming back when they first started, but later on, not only was he starting to kind of lose interest, but he also got into a lot of fights with, I think, especially Gene. I heard that he had chucked his drumsticks at him, hit Gene in the back of the head during a show. He was sabotaging shows. He would stop playing altogether, or he'd change the tempo mid-song, which the other band members didn't appreciate. You know, they had like an unspoken rule that you can, like, don't bring anything, don't bring your shit onto the stage. They just, you know, they had the mindset of, these people paid a lot of money to be here, they waited a long time to be here, give them the best show we possibly can. So when he started doing that, it was like definitely breaking their code, that they're not like code, but their unspoken rule. But he's got some good vocals, like Black Diamond, Beth, Dirty Living. They're all really good songs. They're probably some of my favorite Kiss songs that I've heard. And especially Beth, like, when you think of Kiss and you see the pictures, you think that this is like, it's a heavy metal band. It's not like a band that wouldn't give you like heavy metal. But then they came out with this song. It was a ballad, and they don't. There's no guitars. There's no drums. It's just an orchestra. There's piano. There's violins. It's completely different from what you think of Kiss, but he sang that song well, and he wrote it for his wife. Because musicians, especially on tour, they're away from their families a lot. Again, he was also a pretty good drummer when they first started out. He definitely wasn't the best one they had, but he was good for them when he was with them. And personality-wise, he was just a good guy. I heard this story that Ace told where, like, backstage, he would do impressions of characters. And he would make pretty much everyone back there laugh. He would go on these tangents in character voices, which, good for him. I mean, he had talent he had talent outside of, singing and playing the drums. But overall, I think he's a pretty good guy. He had some problems with, like, substance abuse, but from what I know, he's sober now. He's resolved those issues, which not a lot of people can, and I'm glad that he got the help that he needed. For number 6, I picked Gene Simmons. He's definitely not my favorite. I mean, he's not even in the top 5. He's my least favorite of the original 4. But musically, he knew how to sing. Some really good vocals, like Deuce and I Love It Loud. Those are really good songs that he sang. He is kind of like, a lot of people consider him to be the biggest asshole in rock and roll, but he's very brutally honest. If he has an opinion on something, he tells you how it is. He tells you what he feels about it. He doesn't change his opinion. He won't say one thing and then turn around and say another thing. And he also, what I call his magic tricks on stage, which would be the spitting blood, the fire breathing, and the flying. It's really cool seeing that. The first time I saw it, I lost my mind, because, like, how do you breathe fire? That does not seem possible in any means. And he's also a good bass player. I don't really hear the bass lines in most Kiss songs because of how loud the guitars and the drums are. But when I can hear the bass, I like the bass lines that I can hear. For number 7, I chose Eric Singer, the last drummer they introduced into Kiss, who was with the band. It's kind of on and off from, like, the 90s all the way up to the reunion tour, and then after Peter Criss officially left the band for good, he came back and he was with them until they did their end of the road tour back through, like, 2021 to 2023. And he's a good drummer. Again, the Kiss drummers all seem to be really good. From the backstage footage I've seen, he's very energetic. He's, like, running all over the place and driving everyone else nuts. And he's also just kind of a silly, quirky guy. Like, he kind of acts like a little kid at times, which I think is pretty funny, because this is, like, a grown adult for a heavy metal band, or a rock band, whatever you want to call them. So, he's just a nice, silly guy that I don't really see much of him. I don't really search out videos that talk about him. but when I do see content relating to him, I just think he's a cool, funny guy that a lot of people hate for no reason, because there's a couple of Kiss fans, well, there's a lot of hardcore Kiss fans that just don't like anyone that wasn't an original member, which I think is kind of weird. I mean, even though they're not an original member, they can still be a good musician. They can still be a good guitar, drum player, whatever it is that they're playing. But I try to find the good qualities in all of them. There are some that I don't like as much as others, but like Eric Singer will never be a better Catman than Peter Criss was, because Eric Singer also wore the Catman makeup. But he's never going to be a better Catman than Peter. Especially because the makeup was made for Peter's face, not Eric's face. So it kind of looks a little strange on him, but you get used to it after you see a couple of pictures and videos. But he's never going to be a better Catman than Peter Criss was, because Peter was the original Catman. For number 8, I chose Tommy Thayer, the most recent guitar player that they introduced into Kiss, who joined after the reunion tour, because Bruce was still with them up until the reunion tour. And just like Eric, he will never be a better spaceman than Ace was. The makeup looks a little off on him, and again, the makeup was made for someone else's face. But he's also a really good guitar player. He does tend to copy Ace's style a lot. Like, a lot of people have pointed that out. And it was pointed out in this video that I watched a couple days ago by Scooped Mids. It was his retrospective that he did on the band. And he pointed out that Tommy Thayer tries to play exactly like Ace. Even solos that, these are his words, even solos that Ace didn't play, he still makes them sound like Ace did play them. And he showed an example of a guitar solo that Bruce originally played compared to how Tommy plays it, and he definitely does tend to play the guitar a lot like Ace. He's definitely taken his style. But I don't know if he was forced to play that way, or if he just does it on his own because he's technically the spaceman, and he thinks that if he copies the original spaceman style, people will like it more. I don't know. But he seems to be a pretty nice guy. From what I've seen of behind the scenes, he's a nice, friendly guy. Doesn't seem to be someone that you wouldn't want to be around. But he doesn't feature in any music videos, to my knowledge. He doesn't feature in any old or new Kiss music videos. He was in another band before Kiss, and I don't listen to them, so I don't know. But he might have appeared in music videos that they produced. He was just never in a Kiss music video, unlike Eric Singer, who was in a couple of Kiss music videos before the reunion tour, at least. So, overall, Tommy's a nice guy, but he's definitely never going to beat out the original Spaceman. For number 9, I chose Mark St. John. He was the Kiss guitarist for one album. He was on the album Animalize, and he only featured in one music video. Now, if you know Animalize, you might know that there is 2 singles off of that album that got music videos. So, what about the other one? They just shoved Bruce Kulick into that video, which I don't have any problem with. I like Bruce. He was just miming to the parts that Mark already played. And because he was in the band for such a short amount of time and only featured in really one video, there wasn't really much time to get attached to him. I like his guitar solos. Some people pointed out that his guitar solos are kind of forgettable, but I kind of don't think the same way. I think that his guitar solos are really good, especially because I like Animalize as an album. Heaven's on Fire is one of my favorite songs that Kiss ever released. And he also developed some sort of condition. I don't know exactly what it was, but it made it impossible for him to play guitar because his hand would like flare up and it would be really painful to play. And there's a couple of pictures from when he was still with the band where his hand is definitely, you can definitely tell it's like swollen or inflamed or whatever you want to call it. And he seemed to be a really nice guy, but from what I heard, I don't think his personality really lined up well with the other band members, especially Gene. It seems to be a reoccurring problem that they had with their original replacement guitarists, where their personalities didn't line up well, and Gene didn't seem to get along with them. But Mark was a really nice guy from what I've heard, and it's unfortunate we didn't really get too much time to really get attached to him, because he was, from what I know, he was a nice guy. And lastly, my least favorite of the band is Vinnie Vincent, the original replacement guitarist. He has a bit of a reputation. From what I've heard, he was kind of a shady guy. Like, he scammed his audience a couple of times, promising things that never ended up coming. He was also charging them like $200 to be a part of his Facebook group. He also tried to copyright the name Vinnie Vincent's Kiss, which Gene didn't really like. Gene shut that down almost immediately. He was also one of the many session guitarists that appeared on the Creatures of the Night album. Creatures of the Night came out at a time that Ace was kind of disconnected from the band. He didn't really want to be a part of it anymore, but for legal and promotional reasons, he, for some reason, still had to be in promotional pictures, so that's why his face is on the album cover. And Vinny was just one of many people who played on that album during, again, he was a session guitarist. And he never ended up signing an official contract with the band, so he was never really an official member, which caused him to sue them at least 14 to 15 times over songwriting royalty rights, which, although he lost all those lawsuits, it actually caused him to go bankrupt. He had to declare bankruptcy. He had to sell off his songwriting royalties just to pay for the legal fees of all these failed lawsuits. But he's a talented songwriter. A lot of the songs that he wrote for the band were really good. And his guitar work was alright. I know he insisted on longer guitar solos, and the rest of the band at the time would call his guitar solos the high point of the show because they claimed that was the part of the show where everyone left to go and get high because his guitar solos were so bad. But I don't want to be that rough on him. Everyone has a different playing style, but if the rest of the band didn't agree that his guitar solos were worthy of being that long, then he probably shouldn't have tried to do it. There were times where they literally just cut him off, where they'd walk out back on stage early, and they'd just cut him off, and he'd get really mad at them. He got into a couple of verbal altercations with Gene backstage. They ended up firing him, bringing him back, firing him, then bringing him back and firing him again. Because they really didn't have anyone else that could replace him at the time. And I don't know, I just don't really get good vibes from him. I don't really like his attitude. in a lot of earlier interviews he did with the band, he seems to be this quiet person who tends to keep to himself, but there's stories that kind of tell otherwise. And I know Paul and Gene are kind of notorious for telling stories the wrong way, or telling them in a way that makes them look like the better person. But just from what I've heard other people say about Vinny, some of the things I kind of have to believe Paul and Gene on for this time, because there are times where a lot of the things that they say aren't true, or blowing something way out of proportion. But Vinny's my least favorite. I do like his makeup design. The Ankh Warrior wasn't really around for that long, but it's a pretty creative design. At least he was original with his makeup, because later on they just didn't really care about whether or not they wore someone else's makeup or not. Alright, so those are the final rankings. The rankings are Eric Carr, Ace Frehley, Paul Stanley, Bruce Kulick, Peter Criss, Gene Simmons, Eric Singer, Tommy Thayer, Mark St. John, and then Vinnie Vincent. Hope you all enjoyed watching, and I will see you soon.